Okay, for this class, we did a self-care plan, and mine stated basically that this class is in and of itself my self-care because I really get a lot from educating myself on topics that are very impactful in society as a whole, but also like politically, and being able to gather information on things that I did not know prior or further my education in things I've heard about before is really important in helping myself make decisions and help in any way I can, but also help people that I'm surrounded by understand to more detail things that are happening in the past and also things that are happening right now and the consequences of those things. And so in this last 2 weeks, the things I want to talk about and focus on were Blackhawk chapters 1, 2, and 3, the Miranda chapter 1 document, and then the movie Who Controls the Land. To start with Blackhawk chapters 1, 2, and 3, and the intro a little bit, it was a lot of information. It was a lot of pages, so I'm going to try and go quick with the summary. It was basically detailing the history of colonialism and the horrors and all these heinous acts against Native American populations from the beginning. So starting with like the Spanish conquistadors and stuff, and how it started in the Caribbean, and the Spanish were like the epitome of horrors, and how other European nations did not want to be like them, even though they did horrible things themselves. They're like, as long as we don't do that, we're not as bad. A statistic from one of the chapters, I think it was chapter 1, that I found really interesting was that there were 3 million Native Americans as a population in 1493, and within 5 years there was only 500 left. And then there was a quote that followed this that said the Spanish used terror not only to control Indians physically, but also to show fear, and it was on page 30. I think this was really interesting to see and like have it associated with this context, because in my genocide class I'm taking this term, we're talking about how fear-mongering and getting into the heads of people will make them do heinous crimes. So like when you're learning about these things and you're like, how could somebody do that? That's how, is people use a perceived threat to get into your head, and that perceived threat is enough to make people do horrible things. I also think it's really interesting and important for people to realize that Native American transatlantic slavery was happening prior to African transatlantic slavery trade. And I feel like when people mention slavery, that's mostly what they think about is the African transatlantic slave trade, which is horrible in and of itself. But so is this. Like, how within 5 years can you almost murder 3 million people? I also found the Great League of Peace really interesting with the Iroquois. I think I'm saying that correctly. And how they banded 5 nations together and used their forces together to withstand the consequences of contact with settlers, and how it was beneficial to them and they were able to withstand the forces coming at them, even with the great disadvantages, like military-wise and weaponry. As for the Miranda chapter 1 article, it was just detailing different accounts, whether it was from Native Americans themselves or the settlers and their experiences with each other, and how they detailed like forced labor, the views from the settlers, and how they saw Native Americans as like animals, and they used that to justify their mistreatment and abuses against them, and they justified everything in the name of God, and how they were given this divine right to do these things to make the world a better place. And a hard part for me in doing this was detailing how Native Americans themselves were making the weapons used against them for like flogging or like the korma, and just hearing how they would make them and then be at the hands. And then the movie Who Controls the Land was really interesting to me, learning about Bears Ears Monument, and how there's like Phil Lyman, I believe, who uses this ideology that because he's an ancestor of the first Mormon settlers, he has a right to this land, even though these Mormon settlers were not there first, even though they claimed to be, and how they were stealing artifacts from the resting places of the Native American tribes that occupied the land, and how this is just the colonial mindset of the time, is like, I have this right to it and I'm going to do everything to take it. Yeah, those are short summaries. There was a lot of information going through, but I thought it was just really interesting and really frustrating to see how, for like the Bears Ears Monument, that it's a national park, or was, I think at the end it said that got taken away, but how when it comes to other national parks, most people are super supportive. They're like, yeah, save the land, but if it's associated with Native Americans or any minority group, then they become anti whatever it is, and they're like, no, we don't want that, even if it would be beneficial. Yeah, thank you.